Welcome everyone to another one of our Frontline conversations with leaders in the greater Washington region, talking about the impact of COVID, talking about the crisis that we're in, talking about the unrest that we've seen. And we are thrilled today to have Rosie Allen-Herring with us. Rosie, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of your help and support to LGW over the years. Whenever there's a crisis, a problem in the region, the United Way of the National Capital Area is the one that people go to first, I think, to get advice, guidance, help, and to help structure some kind of response. So first, as we start, let me just ask, how are you doing personally? Where are you and how are you doing personally?
Doug, I am coming to you from my home office / my personal closet in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. And normally I would tell you I'm doing great. I would tell you I'm fine and we handle whatever challenges come our way, but I won't lie to you or any of my colleagues in LGW today. It's a tough time. It's a tough time for me personally. It's a tough time for my family. It's a tough time for many of my colleagues. It's a tough time for our country. So I think I'm doing as well as I can be, as well as I can, do in terms of just the work that's before us. And the energy that you have to have in order to be able to make some change.
So you told me an interesting story the other day about a team meeting that you had where you were asking people for how they were feeling. I always start off these conversations because I think it's important to take time to just stop and assess and think about how we're doing personally, what we're doing to help get through these very stressful times. Because it's not just COVID, it's not just the unrest, it's the economic recession, it's climate change, it's sort of all these things happening at once. It's a very stressful time. But the racial unrest we've seen, what I call the righteous unrest, really has shaken this country to its core. I hope that we'll see change from this. But talk to me about the staff meeting you had and how someone finally opened up and said, I need help.
Yeah. I think like most of our colleagues, we've been working remotely. A few of us go in the office here and there. But every Friday we have what we call our all hands meeting. And I will tell you, at the beginning of the crisis, when we were all going through dealing with the effects of COVID, many of our millennials were super excited about being able to work remotely. The first 2-3 weeks, every Friday, it was a happy time. They were so great. It was like, oh my gosh, we love this. We could do this forever. And we've had virtual happy hours and we're doing virtual yoga. And it was just fun. The last maybe 4 or 5 weeks, they started to drift where they needed that personal touch. And they were like, oh my gosh, I'm dragging. I need to really get to a bar and have a drink with a real person. The walls are closing in my small apartment. And then we had to sort of kind of level set for them saying, guys, you've just really been inconvenienced. But of course, since the George Floyd incident, we've had a couple of all hands meetings. And I will tell you the second week, I'm going around and I'm literally trying to ask everybody how they're doing. And one of our colleagues who works in IT, Javar Bonham, finally said, Rosie, to everybody's on the call, I'm not okay. And when he said it, you could just see the gasps, of everyone. And he said, I'm not okay. I'm an African-American man, I'm a Black man in this country, and I've been told that I don't matter. I have 2 Black sons. What am I to tell them? And then Dirk Butler, who is our vice president for community impact, who literally leads much of our work, spoke up and said, I'm not okay. And I realized we have 5 African-American males who are on our staff who all felt that they weren't okay. And so I asked them, to convene, and the following week we convened, and they shared so much of their own personal stories where I was amazed, that one, that they were willing to share. 2, I was amazed that they shared the intricacy of that they decided to go so personal. And it brought me to tears because it said that we are an organization that's supposed to be here for everyone else's crisis. What happens to us when we find ourselves in crisis? And I realized that there was a voice that we had not expended as your United Way. And so even though I've certainly done op-eds and I always get asked my opinion and I have people who help me craft that, I said the next voice that you will hear from United Way would be that from our African-American male colleagues to tell us, how does it feel to be in this work of trying to be there for everyone else and not feel necessarily valued and appreciated. And they were awesome. They crafted something that were their own words. We did not script it. We did not control it. We did not edit it. These are their words, and it's coming out in an op-ed from those 5 Black colleagues that represent the LGBT community, represent all geographics, a part of Virginia, Maryland, and the district. They are husbands, they are fathers. It's millennials, you name it, they're there, and that's going to be the next voice that you hear from United Way, that African American male voice for us, that shares that we are not only the people to try to have the answers, but we also are human too. So long answer for that.
Now, let me ask a couple questions to follow up. One, how do you build the trust so that someone feels comfortable in saying, I'm not doing well in front of their boss, in front of the head of the organization, that it's okay, they know they're going to do it. So how do you build that trust to make that happen? And then how are they doing now? Have you done things, or have they done things to make them feel better?
I mean, I think that, the trust comes with over time. As a leader, there's a certain level of respect that comes with the role, but I think the trust comes, you just simply have to earn that as a leader. And I'm grateful, quite honestly, that they thought enough to share it in an open setting, but more importantly, that they shared it with me, expecting and knowing that I would assume responsibility for trying to make things better. I think it's also the fact that in having those all hands every Friday at 12 o'clock, and starting with how you're doing, and if someone says that they're struggling a little bit, it was everything from the EAPs that we offer, flexibilities that we offer, pushing people to take leave, bringing in psychologists to talk with people. And again, this was all initially around the pandemic of COVID. We didn't realize we were going to have to deal with the pandemic of systemic racism rearing its ugly head as it has, and just highlighting the infrastructure and how much work we still have yet to do. So I'd like to believe that it's been over the years that we've been trying to earn that trust, and that they believe that if they said that they weren't okay, we would care enough to do something about it.
I've always felt that in times of crisis or unease or unrest or whatever, that too many people start and say, okay, well, we'll build the trust now. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. You got to have it built. In the good times, you got to build that trust so that in the bad times, they trust you and they step forward. It takes courage to step forward and say, hey, I'm not feeling well. I've got a problem with this. Things are happening here that we need to talk about. So talk to us about the United Way and what you've been doing, starting with COVID. I know you had quite a bit of change in your response to things.
Sure. I mean, when it comes to COVID, your United Way, our job is to be here for you. And the blessing is I have the opportunity to work with a phenomenal group of professionals who deeply care about this community and what we have to do. So at the moment that we knew that COVID really was not going to be some kind of episode that was going to go away, within really 24, 48 hours, we were able to reactivate our emergency assistance fund that really spoke to the fact that we created that fund now 5, 6 years ago when I first came to United Way. And at the time it was dealing with a federal government shutdown. That's where the latest crises have come from. But the fact that we had it and we could activate it in no time flat said, that we were ready. And being able to then convene and work with others to have them be able to see this as a viable tool to be able to funnel resources and distribute them to those who needed it the most, but also to see us as a subject matter expert or a thought leader around understanding where the true rub, where the real issues lie, and having the relationships to be able to work with partners to make certain that the care and the resources were getting to those who needed it most. So it's continued over time. I believe that we were built for this. This is what we've been saying now, and this is why your United Way should exist.
So Robert McNamara has a question of where do you see the most need of help in the region today, and what are some of the things that you're focused on?
Sure. Well, I would say it continues to evolve. At the beginning, of course, of the crisis, it was really around food insecurity and what was happening a lot with many of our children who were just beginning in the distance learning, but recognizing that so many of them, the only meals that they were getting were likely in school. And one of the first people we reached out to, believe it or not, was Dr. Monica Goldson from Prince George's, the CEO of the Prince George's County Public Schools, who was able to help us understand on the ground, serving families every day, what that need looked like. So it's continued to evolve. to then became frontline workers and the healthcare experience and what that needed. We evolved there. And then we became, aware of the economic issues and the hit that's happening there with regards to many of the families losing wages. Many of those wages are not recoverable. Who was considered an essential worker? Who would have thought that the grocery store, shelf stacker and the grocery store, cashier was considered essential? But we all recognized that we needed them when we were hoarding toilet paper. And so it's one of those things that it continues to evolve. But what I will say is for Your United Way, we were already in the throes of working on what we call our community commitment. We do them in 5-year tranches. And June 30th, we wrap up our first 5-year commitment that we started back in 2015. And we had already been working over the last 9-10 months to craft our next 5-year commitment of what we're going to do over the next 5 years until 2025. And we're ready to launch that now. I think what is timely is the fact that we've come to see a lot of the things that we saw were issues back 2-3 years ago when we were looking to chart the trajectory for the next 5 years have come to fruition, and equity being one of them. So one of the things that I do want to share with the audience today is a part of that commitment so that they can see where our work is going over the next 5 years.
So we've got a video here that Chase will put up for us, and we'll take a look at that on your next 5 years, Rosie.
Okay, thank you. This is from Your United Way, thinking about our next 5 years worth of work that will center on equity in the areas of education, health, and financial stability. But we wanted you to see this. This is something, believe it or not, we showed to our board in March. And so I want to thank Dirk Butler and Nadelka Phillips and Kevin Smith and Rose Johnson, who are all LGW alums or going to be, for their unique leadership in getting us to this point. Dirk joined us not even a year ago and said, we have to be data-driven, looking at trauma-informed care around what these issues are, and we have to make certain that we're able to really and truly put our thought leadership in this direction. So he brought us to this equity moment, not knowing that we would be here at the time that it's set to launch. So this is somewhat old with just a picture or two from the last 2 weeks. Otherwise, this was 95% done before back in February. So we can show the video.
When you look up equity in the dictionary, it means the quality of being fair and impartial. And when I think about systems that currently exist, I don't think that they were created with fairness and impartiality in mind.
Equity is the key for the direction that we have to go, no matter what we choose to do, in order to ensure that we're impactful, in order to ensure that we're successful. If we don't ensure that it's equitable, then it just can't be that successful.
When you talk about equality, right, giving everybody the same thing, you can actually deepen inequality. If people are starting from this place, another group of people are starting this place, and you give them the same thing, you can actually boost these people up here because they're doing so well already, and bring these people up just here. So what you've seen is you've actually deepened inequality as opposed to actually wanting to reduce that gap.
I think there's this standard that we've mastered equity, we've mastered equality, like it's all good. And I think it's obvious that that's not true. DC is a place where there's tons of wealth, but there's also so much poverty.
I moved here as a young college student. I was starry-eyed at the possibility of living and being successful in this area. But a college student can't afford a $1,900 per month rent.
The United Way has always, to me, been something that brings people together, that optimizes and organizes collective effort, focusing on these essential areas of need, of economic inclusion, and of housing, and of access to food, and being able to do that in a wholesome and complete way is really important, especially in a region that's as incredibly diverse as this one is.
Equity only says that we want to be fair to everyone. Equity is simply saying that as a person in our free society, where we believe that everyone has certain rights, and where we believe that everyone has a right to be able to be educated, to be able to take advantage of opportunities, to be able to provide for their families.
To achieve what we want as a region, no one can be left behind. Increasingly, as we think about economic development in the region, more of us are talking about inclusive economic development. We all need to progress together, and I think that's the challenge for the next decade.
When you look at the gap, it's what families need in order to survive and to thrive. Whether or not our children have the access to education, whether or not they're equipped and ready to learn.
There's a lot of opportunity for that growth, for amplifying the voices of people in the DMV area.
If we all care, then that means we can all do something.
We have an opportunity to show the rest of our country what equity can look like.
Community loses genius. The community loses individuals with promise. The community loses a lot when inequity is allowed to exist.
Still get goosebumps when I see it.
Really, that's a very, very powerful statement from our United Way, and I want to thank you for that. And let's talk about how you got to that point. Now, you've been working for a while now on racial equity and trying to combat that in the region through the Washington Regional Association of Grantmakers. We at LGW have been working with them and others as well, with Nikki Gorn at the Meyer Foundation and other groups to fight that. So talk to us how you got to that point where months ago, or even a year ago, you said this needs to be the focus of the next 5 years of United Way.
For us, it's been watching the trends. You know, again, while we certainly lead with a heart to serve others, we're very much a data-driven organization in terms of understanding where those needs lie. And the data has been shown for the last, I would say, three years or so, at least to us, that this is where we really literally need to go. And having the conversations with so many leaders, many of them are LGW alum, you know, Tonya Wellens over at the Community Foundation, Nikki Gorn over at Meyer Foundation, just so many. We've been talking about this for a long time in terms of what does it mean? And over the last 12 months or so, even you, Doug, and Debbie as leaders in this movement, we've been talking about what does it mean to talk about equity? What does it mean to talk about racial equity, economic equity, educational equity, health equity? And so for us, it's just a natural shift. This is all organic. This is not about the world according to Rosie in terms of the direction that I seek to take the United Way. This is the direction that the community is telling us we have to go. And how we look at it going forward is about, you know, measurements. You know, again, this is a feeling organization, but it's a feeling with results. We have to see people's lives change to know that we're doing the right thing. And so this is work that's going to be ongoing for the foreseeable future until we know that we've achieved a certain status that we can all feel comfortable that we've done our part.
So the region and a lot of the leaders of the region had been moving towards focusing on racial equity over the past 2-3 years. You obviously were a major part of that. But I gotta say, one thing that if you ever doubted that there was racial inequity, racial injustice in this country, all you need to do is look at COVID and the results of the people suffering the most, dying the most from COVID. It affected our minority communities much more greatly than anyone else. And the reasons for that are manyfold, but it stems, I think, from this systemic racism that we have in our society that we've had for so many years.
I mean, it literally is. I mean, you know, most people know my story. I am the 10th of 10 children from Greenville, Mississippi. And, you know, again, one of the states that's always at the bottom of the best and at the top of the worst in terms of all of the things that we pretty much measure what's a good livable state. I always believed that that there was, you know, we were exposed and had education as our equalizer. I didn't realize I was poor till I came to Howard University. But I will say, I've seen poverty, I've seen disparity, I've grown up knowing that there were differences. So I'm not naive in that light. I just think that we have to recognize that here in the Washington metropolitan area, where we have 10 of the top, you know, earning, you know, livable places in the country, we're always on the top list for these things. There's notable philanthropy here. There's notable income here. There, you know, we're the fittest city and so on and so forth. When we look at what happens even in this environment that is, you know, where there is so much largesse, we work on the gap, because for those, it's a have and a have not. When you look at those who don't have, the gap is so large between someone who may be a native Washingtonian living east of the river with a third grade education that barely knows how to read the subway map and had never been to the northwest part of the city. That is, crazy in this environment when we see the largesse that is here, because we are highly educated, but it's still not equitable. So for me, and from a racial standpoint, I'm very well aware of who I am. I'm very well aware of what I've come from. I understand, and I'll give you this little scenario. My oldest sister, who is number 1 and I'm number 10, there's 20 years difference. We've never lived in the same house together. She was in college when I was born, headed off to law school. Yes, my parents were old and still having kids. But I will say, she and I have different philosophies on even Mississippi. She sees the Mississippi of Jim Crow era and what was so horrible about it. And by the time I had come along, I lived in an integrated society my whole life. I went to integrated schools from kindergarten on. So I never knew of that whole separate piece. And that's just in one family that we have that kind of disparate, philosophy about life and how we see even our own upbringing. So I don't profess to push my thoughts on someone else. I try to recognize and listen and hear, but the racial disparity is real. It is not in someone's head. When white America gets a cold, Black America really does get the flu. And when, white America gets COVID, they get a ventilator. And when Black America gets COVID, they die. And so it's a matter of just calling it what it is and recognizing all of the underlying conditions that we say contribute toward death are there because of the economic issues, the education issues, and the health issues that were there that already made many of my Black brothers and sisters already behind the 8 ball and could not have survived this even if they wanted to.
Now, you and I have been part of a group of people working on a racial equity summit, race equity in the future Greater Washington, that was supposed to have an in-person convening of about 1,000 people on June 11th. Obviously, COVID changed all of that. We did have a great Zoom conversation the day with about 500 people. But again, this is something that's been building over time. And what's happened, I think, is that we envisioned the summit as a sort of a call to action, that we would alert people to the racial disparity that's out there. Well, it's visible for everyone to know now. So our function has changed. I think Chuck Bean and hopefully will host a session next month with this group on the health disparities resulting from COVID. But we are moving much more quickly in a very good way than we thought when we started planning this summit.
We are. I mean, again, this was almost a year ago that we were coming together with, Dr. Mady Henson, formerly from RAG, Glenn Ogilvie, again, Tonya Wellens, Chuck Bean, a number of partners working with the Democracy Collaborative to really help us look at, what are we really trying to say and do? We didn't want this to be another fad of the moment or something that's just sort of kind of passing through. We needed something with a true lasting effect, but also a deeper commitment to talk about this particular issue. And again, none of us had a crystal ball or could have foreseen or even remotely anticipated that we would be at the point that we are now. And I will tell you, last week's session was very meaningful in a number of ways because it put out there the conversation that we know needed to happen, but it got everyone to commit to having that conversation. When you have a Carla Bruce from Fairfax County and representatives from Montgomery County, Prince George's County, chief equity officers now, which is a terminology or a position we never even, had before, to now talk about what does that mean here in this area. I think it's absolutely powerful. I'm deeply committed to it. And having partners like LGW, Doug, you and Debbie have been there since day one, and we are deeply committed to this. And when we hear what our colleagues are saying, what Tonya is saying from the Community Foundation, what Chuck is saying, and again, Chuck being in the video, Chuck is pretty much in all of my videos, so he's going to be on retainer with us for a while, and then having even our board sort of kind of pivot from just the numbers to the numbers meaning something for us in terms of lives that we touch and try to make better. So I'm committed to it. I believe that all of us as partners are committed to it. We bring all segments of society in terms of who we are as a region to it. And it says that everybody can do something. And so I'm grateful for Glenn Ogilvie and what he's doing from the center. And so we have Heather Raspberry from HAND. It's just quite a remarkable group of leaders who deeply care about this work, who want to see it move it forward, and I believe won't let it go. until we see that progress.
And I will just put in a shameless plug for us. All of them are LGW members as well. So we're very, very happy about that.
LGWs everywhere.
I sure hope so.
It is.
So how about some personal thoughts on the police brutality situation? We did a session 5 years ago after Ferguson talking about police community relations and what needed to be done. And here we are 5 years later. It seems as if things have gotten a lot worse. And we just had that, when the police all over the country know that they are being watched, we still had someone shot in Atlanta recently, running away. So how has that affected you personally and your staff and people that you work with?
It affects me, personally, because honestly, I'm exhausted, from continuing to have these conversations that we should just know better by now. It worries me. My husband and I don't have daughters. I mean, we don't have sons, but I worry about my husband, who is also LGW as well. I worry about this fixation that society seems to have on Black males. I look at my, godsons and nephews, and they're just young, innocent boys. And at what point in time does society start to see them as a menace? When are we really going to have that conversation? So until we recognize that privilege does not give you a pass, privilege convicts you to do even more. Until we start to recognize that we have not been saved for ourselves because we've been so great, we've only been saved for others and to be able to do work. I believe that that's our purpose on earth. I'm not okay, and I'm not going to be okay until we can honestly have these conversations where we can shoulder the responsibility, and that includes from all segments of society. I think it's the fact that you brought up, we were having this conversation 5 years ago. I think about the Freddie Gray situation. I think about the Michael Brown situation, and here we are back again. I think it's worse this time, which is why it feels different this time, because we are in a society where this current administration, because I know I'm amongst friends and we are not partisan, but this administration has somehow encouraged and truly said it's okay to let all of your prejudice show and be proud of it. There is no shame. There is no decorum. There is no being politically correct. There is none of it. We've actually been empowered to be ill to one another, and it must stop. And so for me, I believe this is different this time because people see not necessarily the covert biases, and we're much more aware of the implicit biases that exist. And now we are just blatantly showing who we are in society, which all stems from fear. My philosophy about any and all of this is fear. There's a fear of somehow the privilege that you have is somehow can't be possibly shared, that there isn't enough to go around, that somehow you are inferior enough to be able to earn it the way you expect everyone else to be able to earn theirs. That pull yourself up from your bootstraps when you don't even have boots or strap is ridiculous. But somehow the privilege that you have that was inherited, that was inherent for you and has been a part of your life since before you were born, somehow you earned that, somehow you deserve that. So when we start having conversations in a fair and equitable manner about who we are as a country and why we are the way we are, none of us can go back 400 years ago to things that happened that shape us. But we've been given the country for this point in time and its legacy, and we have to make that change. So it's having honest conversations, recognizing the devil that's sitting literally right there before us, and deciding to deal with it as a group, as sisters and brothers, and certainly as a country.
Well, just one example, when I worked for Montgomery County, we worked with the Justice Department on reforms for our police department. They were critical in terms of coming in, doing an independent review, giving us advice, guidance, giving us things that we needed to implement. And then and President Obama really strengthened that role across the country, the Justice Department reviewing police departments. With the new administration, they wiped all that out. They're not doing that anymore. They're turning around and not looking when there are problems out there. And in many ways, with COVID and the financial problems that states and local governments have had, in the past, the federal government was our partner. Now they are more pointing the finger at us, at these local governments, saying, you know, you deal with it. It's your problem. I just found that during the sniper shootings, during the anthrax attacks, other things, the federal government was there immediately to help. And we're not having that anymore. And in terms of police reform, the Justice Department is a godsend to a lot of places where they can come in as an outside group and make these recommendations that you can then implement. They were extraordinarily helpful to us, as they have been to many communities across the country.
Doug, it's not even that what you're sharing is idealistic. It's not. That's the way it should be. That's the accountability that we're supposed to have when we look at not only our branches of government, from the executive to the legislative to the judicial, but it's also the way that we're looking at things from a city, county, a state, and then federal, response to things. What we've done is made this country turn on itself. And when you talk about the Justice Department being seen as that sort of kind of arbiter of who we are as a country and being able to, if needed, enforce it, that's no longer the case. And it's one word that you shared that I think sums it all up, and that's independence. None of these agencies are independent anymore. They're all run by people who are the antithesis of who that organization is. Let's be honest. EPA is run by somebody who tried to sue EPA. They don't believe in climate change. Education is being run by someone who doesn't care about public education. They want to shift everything, to charter schools. So people who don't believe in the organizations, Rick Perry was running energy department. That was one of the three he was going to eliminate when he was running for president. So when you look at it, there's a trend here that says it's no longer independent, and it has nothing to do with whatever party you're in. It doesn't matter, but that independence is no longer there because we serve, right now we have an administration that doesn't allow you to serve unless you pledge a loyalty to the person who leads this administration. And so that's why we are where we are. And that's why the federal government no longer has the teeth that it had. It doesn't have the respect that it should have as the representative for this entire country. So yes, we are in a bit of a spot that says, it's not about taking our country back, but we may have to, because we really are going to find ourselves in a significant quandary that I believe it's only going to be, it's only going to get worse, because now people are going to be empowered with all the rights and privileges that come with a particular office or role to do what they want, whether it's right or not.
So I always ask people during these conversations for some good news, but I want to give you some good news.
Okay, I'll take it.
Just after the last comment, what struck me was as the feds are saying you're on your own, the local governments, the communities, the grassroots of this nation are ready to respond. They will respond, and they are responding now. And local government, to me, is so great because it's the government closest to people. If you want to get things done, that's where you go. And we're seeing these governments respond. We're seeing these communities respond. All of this unrest, this righteous unrest around the country, is communities responding to what they see as an outrage. And as the federal government turns a blind eye, the people themselves are saying it. So I have great faith in our country. I have great faith in our people. And we are going to keep rising and make sure that our top elected leaders know what needs to be done and know what we want done in the country. So I'm very optimistic about that. It is painful. It is difficult. It takes a lot of courage. We're seeing a lot of people being hurt, but it is going to happen. So that's my good news to you, Rosie.
And you know what? I'll take it any day of the week. And you are absolutely correct, because I too am so proud of our local governments and our state governments. Yes, we saw when it came down to just PPEs, the federal government basically told the states, you're on your own, fend for yourselves, and go out there and negotiate against each other, as opposed to, invoking the Defense Protective Act so that we could, as a country, literally come together. But what happened, many of those, many of those local governments, the state governments, they did become ingenious. They worked together and they negotiated together. They worked in pacts, and we still had to fight, with the feds. But I will tell you, for us here in the Washington metropolitan area, where we look at the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, I give all of our leaders credit. but it also speaks to why we must care about local elections and local elected officials and local leaders as much as we care about the national leaders, because you have to have both. I could not be more proud that 16th Street is painted with Black Lives Matter. Mayor Bowser already had a fan in me, but she has a hell of a fan right now. And looking at 16th Street, and that's a street literally 1 block over from my office. I walk it just about every day in some shape, form, or fashion. And to see that, you know, coming to the foot of power of our entire nation to say that we matter. And it's not about, you know, we're not going to follow the rules or anything of the sort. She merely said we mattered. And that's where we need to put our focus, to watch even Governor Hogan and what he's been able to do for the state of Maryland, and to be independent even of his party, to say, I'm still going to do what's right for this state, and to see Governor Northam do the same, and recognize that we're in a little bit of a microcosm here in the metropolitan area. We really are a region. We should be a state by ourselves. And to say that, you know, what works for everybody else may not work for us, and we have the ability to be able to do what's right for our citizens. I think that that's quite noble, and I am quite proud of our local leaders. And it says, again, why it matters so much that we should be supporting every school board election, every town sheriff, you know, every election matters, not just the national ones.
Really appreciate those comments, especially the ones about Mayor Bowser and Governor Hogan and Governor Northam, because they really are, I think, showing concern and caring and compassion for all of us, trying to help us get through this. Contrast that with Texas, which is now opened up, and basically the governor of Texas says, here's our COVID strategy. You're on your own. It's up to you to make sure you don't get COVID. We don't have any responsibility for it. It's up to you to make sure that doesn't happen. And all that's going to do is lead to a lot more infections, a lot more disease, a lot more death.
It's going to be.
We're seeing that in other parts of the country. Very frustrating.
It's ridiculous because, you know, no one goes out looking for COVID. And as I've come to see it, and I serve on the board of MedStar Health, you know, 30,000 associates, $6 billion enterprise, you know, 10 hospitals between here and Baltimore, on the front line serving families every day. You tell me how someone can really and truly prevent themselves, other than, of course, the protective measures. I look at COVID just like we talk about carbon monoxide. You know, in the wintertime and furnaces, everybody talks about it's a colorless, odorless gas. You can't see it, can't smell it, can't, you know, but it can kill you and your family just sleeping. COVID is the same way. You can't see it, can't smell it, can't touch it. You don't know what it looks like. You don't know what surface it's on. You know, through no fault of your own, unless you're just out in a situation where you know it's likely there and not taking the precautions. So to tell people that you're on your own for something they didn't create, but it's a public health emergency that we all know we have responsibility for, and not encouraging, directing, or holding people accountable for doing and putting in, you know, to taking advantage of the preventive measures is just, it's insane. So to tell someone they're on their own means what? And for many of the states to not close. And I remember looking at the Smithfield factory, you know, where they didn't want to close because people wanted to go to work, and, you know, the economics required it. And then 600 people working in the factory got COVID. Guess what? It closed. And it could have been closed without 600 people being sick and someone possibly losing their life. And the food that you process there, who's going to eat it anyway? And who's going to trust it for how long it takes to get back to a level of trust in this country? So it's just not worth it when we have to somehow value lives.
It really is sort of a fight going on right now in the country about, are we going to be a you're on your own society, or are we going to be a takes a village society, bringing people together? I just think it's sort of, it's reached a peak now with what's happening in the country. It's something that we're going to have to decide as Americans. And again, I firmly believe that the grassroots, the people of this country, can stand up and speak up and fix us and get us back moving on the right track. We do have a couple questions from people. Let me ask Mahan and Tavakoli, our chair. And
to you before you do
Sure.
that, you're absolutely right about our young people. And as the parent of two millennials, luckily college girls, you know, who've done okay, I'm counting on them the same way that my almost as of this Friday, 98-year-old mother counted on me and my brothers and sisters. And so all change generally starts with our young people. Every piece of not so much perceived rebellion starts with our young people because they are our arms, our legs, our minds, our hearts to really and truly see things change for their generation. I'm not shirking the responsibility of what I think can be done in mine, but I am here with a hopeful heart to be able to support those arms and legs of these young people who really and truly will see that we will be different. Absolutely.
And it's great to see our young people out there. The only problem is we need them to vote.
Absolutely.
We got to get them to vote. That's so critical today. So a couple questions from Mahan Tavakoli, Lois Frankel. What are some action steps? What are positive steps that we need to take to move forward to help reduce or erase this racial inequity that we are seeing? What are some action things we can do?
I think you start with just the data. The numbers have to have meaning, and you have to acknowledge the numbers. A lot of times, we don't always want to acknowledge what we know to be true because we don't want to deal with it. So we're going to have to grow some courage, and we're going to have to ask for help, because I think so often we're perceived as weak when we don't know the answers. For my colleagues to say I'm not okay, I could not go into psychologist mode. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have the skill set equipped to be able to deal with that. I don't have all the answers in a normal everyday situation. I rely on the leaders and the executives at Your United Way, that my job is to remove barriers for them to be able to do their work and to be able to shout it from every vantage point that I can. So I think we have to start with, first we have to acknowledge we have a problem. And then we have to acknowledge who needs to be at the table, and it has to be an inclusive group at the table, because no one person has all the answers. No one segment of society can fix it, and everyone has a role in it. And when you bring people to the table, it's amazing the responsibility that comes, as opposed to being on the outside and the fight is just to get to the table, never mind bringing a solution to the table. So that's first and foremost, acknowledging you have a problem, being inclusive, and looking for the solutions, being uncomfortable. And we have to become a society that's okay with being uncomfortable, because generally when we're uncomfortable, it causes us to lash out. It's like, the cat being backed up to the wall and you have to come out scratching. And that's why we have some of the things that we have. If we recognize that we all sink or swim together, I can't win and you lose, and you can't win and I lose, then that's going to be half the battle. So to me, I'm going at it from start, in truth, with knowing that we have a problem, and then I believe we can come up with the solutions, because there are a lot of bright minds in this region. There are a lot of smart people in this region. There's a laundry list of things that we can do to make things equitable, from hiring practices to education access to healthcare access. Those are all things that we can do, but the people who are in the structures of power that are not diverse enough to recognize where they're inequitable won't make those decisions to make things more equitable. So we have to start with, first, we have a problem.
So let me read 3 comments that we've gotten from people. One is from Pinky Mayfield, who said, amen to uncomfortable. How critical that is.
We have to. Lois knows how to make a lot of people uncomfortable. She makes me uncomfortable. Still scared of her.
Lois Frankel. Oh, I love Pinky. Anyway, Lois Frankel said you would answer her question already. We're talking about honest conversations, and that's what we re-emphasized there. And Michelle Booth Cole said, you may say you feel tired, but you look great.
I love you, Michelle Booth Cole. Thank you from Safe Shores. I tell you, Doug, this is not a scripted conversation, and I didn't know all that would be asked, but I'm ready to have the conversation in a very open manner. And as my brother, I adore you. You know that, Doug. And I'm just grateful that you are exhibiting the courage in the environment that you're in, with the privilege that you have, that you're willing to share it. And being able to do that says that you have a level of not so much comfort, but security within yourself of being okay. Because generally when people are insecure, that's when the fight begins. So the security that you have, the care that you have, the willingness that you're willing to put that privilege on the line to have the conversation, and hopefully you won't get beat up by talking to me today, but that's where we go. And if everybody can do their part, can imagine if there are, 2,500 Dougs out here having these conversations, it's a groundswell.
That's a scary thought. That is
No, it's what I'm looking forward to, because we have 2,500 Dougs and LGW alumni all across this country, and we share these similar values of wanting to care for our regions and our communities. That's all it is. It's just care for the community.
Well, I will say one thing. It took me a while to get there, but I do not have FOMO, the fear of missing out. My philosophy is if I'm not there, it's not happening. So
See, there you go.
There you go.
You bring the party wherever you go. You bring the solution wherever you go. I'm not mad at you, Doug. I'm not. So I'm going to take that too. So now
we've got one last question from Chuck Bean about economic mobility, and what are your thoughts about education, transportation, social networks, internships, mentors, or any other area where United Way will likely focus in the next 5 years?
all of the above. Absolutely every piece of that. When we talk about economic mobility, it is, where are the jobs? What are the wages that are needed? How are these families going to survive? We live in a society, we live in a high cost society. We're in a high cost area. And everybody doesn't have the salaries to be able to truly live a fair life for them and their children. We have to look at education. Even just the residual effect of COVID, of which I've been saying for the last probably 6 or 7 weeks, this is not about getting back to normal. This is not even about a new normal. We have to get to a better normal because we're never going to go back pre-COVID. And so it becomes, what's the better normal for us as a society? What's the better normal for us as a community? What is a better normal for us as Washington? So it's about rebuilding and working with the philanthropy sector, where we were meeting every Friday as well, and now we're going to every other Friday. It is one of the smartest group of people who care, who really and truly bring their best to this work. We've been having these conversations, and it's about, recovery. We had to respond, and then it's going to be about recovery, and then it's going to be about rebuilding. And I'm ready to get to the better normal because we still don't know yet what the residual effects of COVID are going to be. We won't know until the fall when our kids go back to school whether or not this distance learning thing has worked. And by that time, many of our children who have summer, brain drain, would have been out of a structured learning environment for over six months. Our kids would have been out of an environment for 6 months in learning. The jobs, many of our hospitality industry, when we look at what Kathy Hollinger is doing with the Restaurant Association, what's happening with our hotels, many of the workers there still haven't come back because we're still not able to not distance. Therefore, these big events that we're so used to aren't happening. Where do those families go when they only get paid if they work? So we're going to be dealing with this for a long, long time. This is not something that's going to be over with come the fall or some magical date or the moment we think that a vaccine is near or ready. This is something we're going to be dealing with, I believe, for the next 24 to 36 months. And so that rebuilding will not be simple. It will not be easy. It will not be fast.
I agree with you absolutely. It's going to take some time to get through this, to get to a better normal. My fear is that right now we're living in there is no normal. It's a dynamic normal. It changes every day. Yes. I think that's going to go on for quite some time, that we're not getting to any kind of normal for quite some time. And that's something that's very difficult for people to adjust to adapt to respond to feel at ease with. And as leaders, we've got to find ways to help them do that. I want to get back to something you had said earlier, which leads to a question from Karen Horzak. And Karen, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to hear from you. But you want to know about, are you at Our United Way working with corporations to help them launch anything to deal with closing a financial wellness gap for Black families, work that can't be done by philanthropy alone, that the private sector needs to get involved?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're doing is, 5 years ago, we created what we call our financial empowerment centers, and they are one-stop shops. Our first one's on the campus of Prince George's Community College with Dr. Charlene Dukes, who was phenomenal and having a vision and forethought to go on this journey with us. And then Dan O'Neill from SunTrust at the time, and then the SunTrust Foundation helped fund us creating that. And then Sharon Bulova called from Fairfax County who said, hey, I heard you're going to have 5 of these financial empowerment centers. The next one I want to be here, and let me tell you where I wanted to go on the Route 1 corridor for Alexandria in Fairfax County. And then, of course, we've done one in Prince William County. Now we have one in Marshall Heights in the District of Columbia, and our final one will be in Montgomery County. That's where we're working with the corporate sector, where people can come in and literally get services. Everything is free. But it's everything from helping you with a business plan to connecting you with mainstream banking services to being able to, of course, help you with volunteer income tax assistance, being able to help you with your business plan, being able to help you, go back to school, being able to help you with all of these, anything that's related to economics. That center is there to support and help you. And so all of our corporate partners, and we have about 3,000 corporate partners who are at various stages on the spectrum of how they are doing and how well they're doing at this moment too, because not everybody is doing well. But what we've recognized is we play to everyone's strengths. And so for us, with our partners, we've been able to look at it from on the ground with many of our nonprofit partners who are on the ground serving families every day, who know what's needed and see it every day, and then those who may be able to bring resources to bear. That is our job as a convener, as a collaborator, and to try to be a catalyst in bringing some innovative solutions to the table. And we've had quite a few of those even during this COVID crisis. Windows Catering, Geppetto Catering, with Josh and crew, they were trying to keep their workers. They had furloughed 85% of their staff, but we had donors who wanted to do something to help. They needed to get their staffs back to work. They were preparing food, and guess what? We send it to first responders. So that's the way this ecosystem should always be working, the way that we connect with each other. So that is absolutely there. Our corporate partners have been extremely, extremely helpful to us. I did write down a few of them, and they all seem to have LGW connections, Doug. So we really literally are everywhere. For Your United Way, when we did our emergency assistance fund, PEPCO was one of the first ones to step up. Dave Velasquez, Melanie Lassiter, they got it. They got it fast. We were connected with a family, foundation, Brian from Diana Leon Taylor, Diana Leon Brown from Prince George's County, Truist Foundation, which is now BB&T and, formerly SunTrust, Craig Pascal, Evelyn Lee, Philip Graham Fund, Pinky, Richard Bynum, Care First, Artist Hampshire Cowan, Charlene Dukes, Michelle Hagan, Meyer Foundation, Nikki Gorham. We had always been connected in the work that we were seeking to do, but that thought leadership and the fact that we had to do something different and do it now, Nikki and Janice, came through for us. Bank of America, Derek Perkins, Frank Williams, as I was thinking today, it was like, man, LGW connections, M&T Bank, just my United Way team, who, are all LGW people, TD Charitable Foundation with, Terry Kinney and Jada Thornton, you name it, Tonia, the crew, it's just, none of us can do this work alone. So although I'm here having this conversation with you, I have it in the spirit of bringing all of these people who we are working with are sitting here with me at this moment, having the same conversation with you, because believe you me, these conversations have been had. I just get the privilege of sitting here and talking about it.
And another shameless brag, it seems as if you're just reading the LGW draft.
I know, I felt like it.
Great, it's great. Thank you for all those shout outs to LGW members and your partners who are helping us through this. As we close, let me ask you a final question, then let you give a last word if you want. What leadership lesson have you learned or has been most valuable to you in these past couple months?
Oh, Doug.
And that's a Mary Abjay question, by the way.
Of course it is.
So you can thank her later.
I will most certainly thank her later for a myriad of things. Debbie has been Mary Abjay taught me how to cheer for women. I will tell you my biggest leadership lesson is truly being uncomfortable about not having the answers. I've always been somewhat confident and being able to come to an answer, or at least if I don't know, I can go figure it out or go find a person who knows and can figure it out. And, that was the answer, to know that you don't have it and go get it. For me now, it is the lesson that I feel some deep responsibility for this country. and where we are and where we're going to go. The lesson is it's not someone else who's going to have to figure this out. I literally cannot lay this at the feet of my children. This is something we all have to figure out together. And so my lesson is to have become uncomfortable. I am deeply uncomfortable at this very moment to think about, what appears to be insurmountable, but we're going to figure it out. I am concerned for this country in terms of our direction, and I have no idea where this election will go. So my leadership lesson is to buck it up and to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, to figure out how to align with others to ensure that there's a much more broader solution to the challenges that are out there, and to never, ever, if I've learned anything from my 98-year-old mother, is to never, ever give up, because there is no way on earth that I can let a country that she has given me and my ancestors have given me go back 450 years. I just can't do that. So the lesson is face your fears, get over yourself, and figure out what you're going to do next.
Rosie, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It's really been extraordinary. That's a great leadership lesson, and it's a great last word for all of us as we move on. I want to thank you again, Rosie. Thanks for everything you've done for LGW. Thanks for everything you've done for our United Way, for the region, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you to everyone who chose to give us their time today. I hope it's been meaningful. It has been for me. And thank you for just the blessing of friendship and for all that LGW does for so many across this region. Thank you all.